Hello, everybody, and welcome to another Free Real Estate Advice Friday. Today is March 29th, 2024, and this is episode number 75. And today we have the pleasure of having a special guest, and that is Dave Gallman. He is a realtor in Dallas, Texas area, and we're going to have him on. And the reason we're having Dave on today is I wanted to bring in someone else who has some things to say about what's going on with this NAR, National Association of Realtors settlement. So there's a lot to talk about. If you tune into my TikTok channel or YouTube or anything else, you've seen me discussing this. And, this is always a consumer facing podcast. So we want to there's obviously a lot of conversations going on amongst agents, but we want to talk about this in terms of the consumer, what this could potentially mean, because largely, I think what's being reported is not necessarily misleading, although sometimes it is misleading or misreported, but oversimplified. Let's just say that. So I think there are a lot of considerations that, again, I've been putting out that need to be discussed. So let's get into that a little bit. And I always like to bring in another agent on these types of topics because it's good to just have, another eyes, ears, and mouth to talk about the subject. So without further ado, here's Dave Gallman out of the Dallas area, and he's going to tell us a little bit about where he comes from.
Hi, Craig.
How we doing, Dave?
Yeah, it's a beautiful day in Dallas. Happy Good Friday to everybody. Happy Easter weekend.
Thank you, sir. What's the temperature in Dallas today?
Pardon? So actually, it's about 50 degrees, which is a little chilly.
Oh, it's not. That's about what it is here in New Jersey.
A little overcast. So
yeah,
it's actually pretty pleasant here.
That's great.
We're heading into summer, spring, and fall in Dallas are really very pleasant. In general, the weather is nice. There's about 6 weeks in the summer where it's just ungodly hot and miserable and unbearable. And we pay for the fairly nice weather the rest of the year in that just miserable six weeks. Where so anyway, so yeah, thanks for having me on. So my name's Dave Gallman. I'm a Keller Williams agent here in Dallas, Texas. I have been in the business for about 8 years. Mostly I do residential real estate where I help people buy and sell houses here. I do a little bit of land and I've done a little bit of commercial, but mostly where my bread and butter is helping families make those big moves in their housing sale.
Yep, same here. A little bit of this, a little bit of that, but mostly what you're saying as well.
Yeah. I mean, and really, I think every talented agent, every good agent has to sort of go where the opportunities take them. So there's always a little bit of stuff, that we do on the sides. Everybody's done some lease work, everybody, that kind of thing. But by and large, I do that. I'm an independent, so I don't have I have people that work for me, but I don't have some big team of people. I call myself an independent agent, or a lone gunman, if you will.
Yeah.
All right.
Same here.
Yeah. And it's a very interesting moment in Dallas real estate. I'll tell you.
That is for sure.
2023, I think all of us were scratching our heads going, we're exiting the pandemic market, and there's some turbulence, and there's some good deals happening and some bad deals happening and some fluky deals happening. And it was hard to sort of get your bearings. I would say, in my impression right now, inventory is quite low, and yet the market is quite hot, right? I have had 3 listings, so houses for sale, and they all went under contract in the first weekend. I've had buyers that I was working with, and for every contract we were in multiples.
Yeah.
Now, we weren't, it wasn't pandemic multiples. It wasn't 12 or 20 offers, and it wasn't 50,000 or 100,000 over list price. It was maybe 2 or 3, which feels more normal in my experience. Pre-pandemic, if you got multiples, it was maybe 3. Right.
Yep.
It's usually you and one other person, and the competition wasn't quite as bonkers.
Yeah.
But and I'll just say, like, that also just has an impact on this moment in real estate industry, because, you know, as we think about what changes might be coming to buyer's agency, no unrepresented buyer is equipped to win in multiple offers.
100%.
I mean, and I'm sure there are very serious, talented business people out there who are like, well, I've done my deals and all that stuff, and all respect, awesome.
Yep.
When you're in multiples, you like there are ways to communicate your value as a buyer to a seller, and unless you have that language, you know how to communicate that, your offer's probably going in the no pile pretty fast.
Right? I mean, at the bare minimum, yeah, at the bare minimum, we have to say that I always like to say, at the bare minimum, you have to have a strategy. As an agent, you have to have chosen your strategy with how you deal with multiple offer situations. And going a step up from that is that strategy obviously evolves. Your process gets a little bit better. You get better at negotiating. You get better at how you present your offers, all of those things with how we get offers accepted. And to think that we might be putting consumers in a position where they might feel like it's a good idea to go straight to the listing agent is scary for the consumer. And that's always been a thing, right? I'm sure, you know, when you have listings, you get all these calls from people. Oh, I only deal with the listing agent. And and I don't know how you handle that, but is dual agency legal in Texas?
So it depends on what your definition of dual agency is. So if you look in the Texas real estate code, dual agency is illegal.
Okay.
But if you look at all of our contracts, intermediary agency is absolutely legal, and it's kind of the same thing, right?
Yeah.
And there are some obligations you have as a listing agent when you're dealing with an unrepresented buyer. You got to wave a flag over it and say, hey, look, I will have these conversations with you, but I need you to sign a document that says you acknowledge I'm representing the other guy. Like, I'm not your agent, right?
Yeah. So when I get an opportunity for dual agency, it is legal in Jersey. Kind of same thing is we have to, it is allowed, like just, it is allowed, but we do have to sign things, and there's obviously very specific rules for how it works. And I would just say in general, for the consumer, like if I'm representing the seller, I don't necessarily want to get in dual agency because I don't want to compromise my relationship with my seller, especially if it's like a repeat client or anything like that. Yeah. So there's obviously a lot of conversations that have to happen in both directions. So when I get these calls and say, hey, I only deal with listing agents, so I want to, you know, tell me about the house, or do you have any offers, et cetera, et cetera. And I always say, sure, I'll share that information with you. Can I make a recommendation? I'm happy to refer you to an agent, or if you have another one in mind or something, you know, it might be better because we are expecting multiple offers if you had your own representation. Oh, no. I'm not interested in that. I'm just interested in this house, and we only deal with listing agents. And no matter how many times I have that conversation, it falls flat. Like, people just don't understand that aspect of it, unfortunately.
Well, my offer is going to be better because I won't have to pay a buyer's agent's commission. So therefore you sell it to me for cheaper.
Yeah.
We're not talking about how much less. We're in multiples. How much more are you going to offer? That's going to win here, right?
Yeah.
What? No. Yeah. And so, like, a lot of times, if in Texas, a lot of times if the brokerages are really doing it properly, what we're supposed to do is have our broker assign another agent from our office to represent the buyer and say, hey, we're doing intermediary, but we have someone you can talk to who will, you know, so there's an arm's length between the buyers and sellers.
Yep.
So this, and like, this gets to a really important point and part of where I think the NAR settlement gets things wrong, right? Or perhaps I should maybe not the settlement, but like where the national media is getting it wrong.
Yeah.
Where did buyer's agency, when did this thing become a thing, right? Yeah. So it was like actually the early 1990s. So it hasn't been around for that long.
Right.
Now, was it some conspiracy of brokerages sitting around going, how can we get more fees? No. So many unrepresented buyers felt they got taken advantage of by being unrepresented. This was a marketplace demand by consumers. And how did they do that? With lawsuits. They got screwed. They sued people. And everybody said, we better do something about this.
Yep.
And so buyer's agency evolved. So everybody says, this is a big conspiracy. No, this was a market-driven response to a demand from the consumer.
Yes.
You know,
and buyer's agency, like by definition, buyer's agency is a great thing. But because we have all this uncertainty in the industry of like people coming to us, just coming straight to the listing agent, or not wanting to commit to one agent, or things like that, where, and let's face it, like the overlay of every real estate conversation involves one thing with me, and me speaking personally here, is, and no secret in our industry, I think the biggest threat to our industry is incompetence. So there are a lot of bad buyer's agents out there.
Right.
I don't know about you, but let's go back to pandemic levels when we were taking 15, 20 offers on every home.
Right.
The number of offers that I would get, and again, speaking for myself, you can say if this was the case.
I know exactly what you're going to say.
I get 20 offers, and out of 20 of them, 18 of them could have gone right in the trash can, only because they were so flawed, sloppy. I had never talked to the agent. I didn't know who they were, you know, just like so many different directions. Now, obviously I'm presenting all of them to cover my bases here, but I'm just like embarrassed for our industry when I get them and I say, oh my God, someone is hiring this person to help them with not only the biggest financial transaction of their life, but finally they found a house. They're putting an offer in, their hopes are up, and they don't know that there's some other listing agent out there and saying, my God, I would be crazy to take this offer and work with this agent, because I'm nervous for my seller. It's not because I have any bias towards that buyer's agent. It's because I'm worried for my seller that this thing's not going to hold together. This agent doesn't know what they're doing. Are they advising their clients properly? Do they know how to get through an inspection and like help negotiate it? Like all of those things. Lenders, right? Like who's this lender? I never heard of this lender. Is this a good lender? Is this a bad lender? I don't know. All of those things or where buyer agency does present value to the consumer. You have the right to go out and find someone good and be confident, strategize, talk about things. And I think that's a lot of how this kind of came back to us, right? Full circle. Like now we're back to discussing buyer's agents and how buyer's agents are compensated, which we'll get into. And I wanted to step back. Go ahead, Dave. Sorry.
Because I have two anecdotes. I got offers during that period of time where it was the contract was blank except for the name of the buyer and the section on price.
Yeah.
That was it. And you were like, for real? Real? Like,
how much time
are you just expecting me to fill in the rest on terms that are favorable to me? I mean, like, what are you talking about here? Like, and that I knew when you started into that, I was like, I know. Oh my God. So, you know, like some data about good and bad agents.
Sure.
So most 40% of agents do 0 to 1 deal a year.
Yep.
80% do 1 to 4 deals a year.
Yep.
Right. My opinion, and I have no animosity. I want everybody to be successful and have meaningful work to do. And some of those people who are doing 1 to 4 deals, that's a second income for their family and maybe a meaningful source of money and so forth for them. And they could be doing great work. Volume isn't necessarily.
There's good part-time agents for sure.
You know? Yeah. But if that 40% were ground out of the business, that would probably be a good thing for the industry.
Yes. Most likely.
I know that sounds mean-spirited. I'm not a put the fire hose in their mouth and turn it on full blast. I'm not that guy. But
Dave, it's an interesting point because like, you know, like, you know, and I picked you. So let's take a step back to how we met, because we were trying to figure it out before the call.
Yeah.
But, you know, there's all sorts of online forums for agents like myself and you who are just trying to get better and you know what's going on out there and learn about different strategies and, you know, all the good things that we're trying to do to be better.
Right.
And at some point, you know, someone else had posted something. I think you commented on something and I commented and I was like, you know, this guy, I like what this guy has to say. I friended you on Facebook. That could have been 2 years ago, 3 years ago, 1 year ago. I have no idea.
And we've talked about doing this before. I mean, this is just our moment.
yeah, correct. But, you know, like so that's the thing is like so I'm a full-time agent, I
Me
always
too.
shoot for 25 deals a year. I try to get as close to that as I can. That's a full-time good living. I'm very happy to do that.
Mm-hmm.
But the biggest threat to this industry is that you get a lot of bad this position that we're sitting in gets a bad name because of it's not hard to become a realtor, but it's definitely hard to stay one. And in order to stay one, you got to get better. And in order to get better, there has to be good compensation. There has to be, something where I know that. So my background is I got into this in 2019, which by the way, here in New Jersey in 2019, the hardest part for me was finding a client. I was brand new, but once you got a client and you went and visited houses, you'd visit 4 houses, say, all right, which one do you want? They would say, I want this one. You would say, all right, we'll write the offer, and that would be it. You have the house. Like that was it. There was no multiple offers. Like if you were a listing agent and you got 2 offers on your listing, it was grounds for celebration. Like, oh my God, we got
nice
2 offers. Yeah. So right. 2019, very different.
Yeah.
But it's not like that anymore. So if you want to stay in this business, you really have to kind of be on top of your game. Now, as you said, if that's what this business looked like, I think the communication about what real estate agents do would be much different, because you and I both know that real estate deals are incredibly difficult. Up here in New Jersey, like particularly where I live, we have probably 70% of the deals that I do have septic systems. That's always, that's a $50,000. Yeah. That's a $50,000 token right there, is like, if that thing's good or bad, that's a $50,000 swing. Yeah. So that requires a lot of knowledge.
7 years, I've done 3 houses with septic systems.
Yeah. Well, you're in more of a metro area. Like we're probably, to give you an idea, and Texas is much bigger, obviously, but New Jersey, where I'm sitting right now, we're about 1 hour from New York City and 1 hour from Philadelphia. So we're right smack in the middle.
And my brother-in-law is a Hill boy. I'm fairly familiar with New Jersey.
Oh, there you go. Yeah. So what's interesting about this area is we are equidistant from those 2 places. So we do have a fair amount of commuters, especially as work schedules have changed. Now people are only commuting 2 days a week, and they're like, I can live an hour from New York City. That's fine. There's a bus in town, piece of cake. But we are also considered to be like one of the last areas where you can still get some good deals on taxes in particular. So property tax in New Jersey is a known problem, but our area, for relatively speaking, it does not compare well to Texas, but relatively speaking, this area is decent deal on property tax. You got 3 acres and a 4-bedroom house, you're going to pay about 13-14 grand a year. That's a deal in New Jersey. So as the pandemic started happening, guess what? We got inundated. Like everyone's like, what's this Hunterdon County thing I'm hearing about? And here comes everybody. That's when everything blew up, and that's when agency changed very much. So that's my background. That's how I got involved. Now, the other thing I wanted to point out, and I wanted to ask you about, I had an agent on here a few months ago, Jody Garcia. She's out of the Austin area, Austin, Texas. And one of the things that we talk about is process, because process is different everywhere. But here in New Jersey, for one thing, we have attorney review. Attorney review is a required period. Now, that does not mean you're required to use an attorney. It just means that there is a 5-day period where that accepted offer cannot become a contract, because we give the consumer 5 days, both sides, buyer and seller, to say, yes, we're comfortable with this contract. We've had time to have it reviewed. We've chosen not to review it, or we've used an attorney. Where I'm sitting, 100%, every transaction, both sides use an attorney. Some areas of South Jersey, they actually don't use attorneys very often. So actually, when I go do business in South Jersey, it's a one-sided attorney transaction, which, by the way, is my favorite, because then we just get to dictate everything, and they just say, okay, yeah, that's fine. But the other thing about New Jersey, and again, I don't know if this applies to Texas, I'll let you answer that in a second here, is that when we put in offers, you get the entire contract. You get every amendment. Everything is signed by the buyers, ready to go. So that, to your point, is when that offer is accepted, all they got to do is sign. You got everything you need from me. Yeah. So to that point, when we get these agents that give us half filled out contracts, terms that don't make sense, or they blew through asking price, but they have said nothing about how appraisal is going to work, stuff like that, huge red flag. So you got to, like, that's part of the strategy, right? Is you got to put together an airtight contract that when that other agent, especially if I don't know them, says, now this is a good contract. This is something I feel good about. So tell me a little bit about Texas in terms of attorney review and like how you guys do contracts.
So, I mean, this is another, I mean, so how does it work in Texas, right? So I knew that New Jersey and I think New York are attorney states. Texas is a title company state. So
okay,
to be honest, we are obligated to say, here are the documents, and they've got disclaimers throughout. Hey, if you're unsure about this, talk to an attorney. Usually attorneys are not involved unless for me to bring in an attorney, it's going to be maybe one of 2 or 3 circumstances. So what we run into out here sometimes, not very often in Metroplex, but in some of the far-flung areas, you might run into a property that has its mineral rights.
Okay.
And mineral rights around here are oil.
Yes.
That's when I'm like, we're going to have an attorney who does mineral rights work on this part of the contract. That would be one time when I'm like, yeah, let's bring an attorney in. Divorces, you're just going to be living with an attorney when you're doing a divorce one. And then when something goes wrong and someone's angry, those are pretty much the times when those things have happened. But in general, I would say 98 or 99% of the deals are just agents and title companies. And the title company has an attorney that looks through everything.
Sure.
But then you have to sign these disclaimers at closing saying, hey, this attorney didn't represent me. Right. I mean, so we don't have that. That works. All the contracts that we're given, and when you submit an offer, or let's say, I mean, the good agents are going to submit the whole contract. There's standard contracts and addendums that 90% of the deals are going to use, right? There might be a few cases,
mostly cookie cutter, right?
Yeah, and those are promulgated by a lawyer committee in the Capitol. And so most of the time we're dealing with pretty straightforward deals and terms. So when you get one where there's blank stuff on it, or they've written in terms when you're like, man, are you serious?
Yeah.
Like, and so I mean, and then the seller has something that we can sign. When I'm working with the newer agents in my office, I'm like, if you want to get your deals done, write clean paperwork.
Yeah, 100%.
And there's a language in the
first impression
that will show the other side that you're a good agent. And if you are a good agent, it's going to help the process. The word I like to use for real estate deals, they're complicated. Sure. The word I like to use with newer agents, with everybody, is that they're fragile.
Very good point.
And this speaks to some of the issues that we have in thinking about real estate on the consumer side and so forth. If a house were a commodity, right? Like, you can go to San Francisco and spend $200 on a pair of Nikes, and you can go to DC and you can spend $205 or $199 and buy the same pair of Nikes, and it's the same thing.
Yeah.
Every house is unique and different and screwed up and valuable in slightly different nuanced ways. Yep. Right. So there's no easy cookie cutter way to deal with it as a commodity. And everybody in America, we tend not to negotiate for things. We have fixed price models.
Yeah.
And we tend to treat things like they're commodities.
Yes.
And it just doesn't work in residential real estate. It just doesn't I was sort of talking about this with some other agents. And I was like, the problem we have there, 123 Main Street is dramatic. Same builder, same year, same model, same materials. 123 Main Street could be somewhat dramatically different from 125 Main Street, the house next door. 123 Main Street could have these owners that have kept the house perfectly for the past 20 years, and its condition is pristine. no issues. 125 Main Street could have some, disinterested, lazy homeowners that have done nothing, and the swing in value might be $50,000 because
they got a leaking roof.
Needs to be redone entirely.
Yeah, leaking roof, zoning violations. They got a failed sewer line. Like, yeah, exactly.
It's just like, but on paper, as a commodity, they're the same, right? Add another layer of nuance to it, which is what people hate to do. So let's say 123 Main Street, the house that's been well kept, actually has a bad foundation because it was poured incorrectly 20 years ago. But through care and good maintenance, the house is fine. But 125 Main Street structurally is flawless, but because of neglect is worth less. So 5 years after your buyer buys it, 123 Main Street might have big issues. 125 Main Street might be fine.
Yeah.
After you let it, right? Or whatever. So, I mean, it's just, you just can't treat these things like it's a pair of Nike shoes where it's the same. And I will say, here is a big challenge that we have as agents, and that is this. We can't guarantee a result. We can say you're most likely to get the best result if you have someone who's an expert who's helping you. When you're in multiple offer situations, there's ways that I can communicate with a listing agent so that I'm spending the least money of my customer's money possible, where I'm setting up reasonable protections that will be competitive but not give away the game, right? I lost in multiples about 2 weeks ago. It was a very nice house in Allen, Texas. There were 6 offers. That was a lot, right?
Yeah.
And the listing agent said, okay, it's a very competitive field. Here's what the seller would like to see. You're going to waive your option, which in our market, that means your period of due diligence, your week of having inspectors in. You're going to waive the appraisal. You're going to waive, and every, like, sometimes we call them contingencies. Every milestone that protects the buyer in the Texas contract, they were asking us to waive it.
Yep.
And I went back to my buyers and I said, hey, we're making a very strong offer here, but I wouldn't be comfortable telling you that you can waive these.
I've had that conversation many times.
We might lose, but
100%.
If you're buying a house for $900,000, it's better to maybe find one. And, those sellers had offered a seller's disclosure. It's a document that we pass around. I'm sure you got some version of that.
Yep.
Sellers fill something out that says, here are the features of the house and here are the known defects.
Yeah.
So that house had some foundation work and it had some repairs to the roof. So these are rather significant and expensive components to the house. And it's like, so you're telling us that there have been some issues there, but you're saying you're not going to let us look at them.
Right.
And and so we did not, we lost. Someone else wanted it more and was willing to take those risks. Go with my blessing, go with God, because but
I tell people a lot on that front, what I've had to do with clients is say, I never, as a blanket statement, I never recommend that you waive any sort of home inspection. Appraisal also, but kind of a separate topic, separate considerations. But let's talk home inspections. I never recommend that you waive inspection. I do have to tell you in this instance that I can almost guarantee you will not get this house if you do not waive it. I am still not recommending it, but I need you to know that. It's up to you if you want to decide, Craig, I don't care. What's worst thing that can happen? 80 grand. Well, if it's a $900,000 house, they're saying, all right, we understand that worst case scenario is 80 grand and we're prepared for that. You've discussed it with us. We're going to go ahead and waive inspection. But that's it. That's the only time. I am never waving that around hey, here's a great strategy. Just waive inspection. That's now.
I've done a 3-day
approach it that way. Definitely not.
Yeah. Right. So, and in Texas, the part of the nuance, which I think even actually seasoned agents don't understand, is so you can waive your your option, it doesn't actually prevent you from doing inspections, and it actually doesn't prevent you from going back and saying, hey, we found things that we want consideration
Well, that's
for
a whole nother topic. Yeah.
throughout the process. What it stops you, what you give up is the right to walk away, no harm,
Right.
if you find something that's catastrophic.
But here's the thing with that, Dave, like even here in New Jersey, so I've discussed this at length. So up here, attorneys are like kind of an integral part of well, in my business, and in good agents business, they have like a partner attorney, right? And so we very much are in step and strategy and how we approach things and logic and things like that. So I was just discussing this with my attorney yesterday. Is more and more we're getting waived inspections, and they say inspection for information only. And then they do the inspection for information only. And then they say, hey, we're going to this chimney and, and here's a list of $14,000 worth of things we want. And we said, hey, wait a minute. You waived, you said info on. And they say, well, too bad. This is what we want to do. And more often than not, honestly, we let them out of the contract because more often than not. So sometimes they get sued. Most often it's like, whatever, like on to the next one. But it's a total, like, to me, again, it's like just it's not a good feeling. Like, this is not how we should be doing business. And I think that, the conversations that you and I had, like we just described, sets us up to not have those situations. Right. Whereas if an agent is really not talking through that uncomfortable conversation, you're going to get that result where they do the inspection anyway. And then they say, oh, guess what? Well, there's like $14,000. My argument would be like, that $14,000 is what you signed up for. Like, that's literally what you signed up for. You found it. Great. You know about it. I always say to agents that are pushing no inspections on me as a listing agent, I always say, listen, if you really want to waive inspections, do all the inspections you want after we close. You can do whatever you want. Otherwise, I'm going to tell my seller they are waiving inspections, but they're still doing inspections, as opposed to like selling an investment property and the investor is like, I'm going to do a tank sweep and that's it. Like, I'm just looking for underground tanks. There's no underground tanks. I'll take it as is. I know what I'm dealing with. That's waiving inspections.
Yeah. And in Texas, we have some ways of communicating that where the seller is going to say, hey, I want to sell it as is, where is no concessions. Right. Yep. And then we can have that conversation with our buyers and say, well, we can still go and ask for it, but they're telling us up front they're going to say no. So, and like, this is, I can tell, like, you take your role as a fiduciary seriously. You're looking to protect your customers from a bad
100%.
outcome,
Yeah.
right. And
that's what I think that's what keeps us in business.
Yeah, it does. And when you do that, you get referrals.
Yes,
right.
Exactly.
And it leads to more business because somebody goes, okay, he wasn't being a sleazeball for a commission.
Yeah.
He was telling, I had a conversation, a text conversation. I'll send you I'll text you the image of it. Yeah. I have a buyer I've been working with for a while. I'd help them buy a townhouse. I'd help them do some lease stuff. And they've said, oh, we really like this house in Richardson. And I went back and I texted them back and I said, look, I think the school districts there, the schools that this one's assigned to, are really bad, right? You just started a family. You're looking for a specific kind of house, but this probably isn't going to work for your life. And she was like, well, would you send your kids to these schools? And I was like,
good question.
Probably not.
Yeah.
I wouldn't. So I'm telling you, I think, I would pass on this one because the schools, and
that's a great buyer conversation right there.
Right. Yeah. Like you have this idea that this house will be, it's not just the house where you're going to build your life and have birthdays and major life events where you're going to go to get away from the world for a little while. Right? The world is after you. You can go there and be with family and stuff like that. It's also those things like school districts that have a big, major impact. If you want to send your kids to private school in Dallas, it's going to be between $15,000 and $30,000 per kid per year.
Wow. Yeah.
I mean, that's what a good private Right? Not even, I mean, like a decent private school is likely to cost you. So, I mean, if you're going to buy a $900,000 house and you're going to send your kids to private schools, that's got a pretty big financial impact on that. That's a decision point you need to make, even if you love the house and it's the perfect house for you. It's going to have a big unknown consequence on your finances.
Yeah.
Hey, let's go find a house where the school districts are a little better, or the assigned schools for that area are better. And then you won't have that potential additional cost if you don't want that.
Yeah. And you, like all these conversations you're talking about, these are the types of conversations that good agents are having with their clients. But
yeah,
a very close colleague of mine, like, because if it's not that we just talked about, and it's kind of a no, I think the schools are fine. They're like, let's go lock it up. My colleague always calls that commission breath. Like, clients can smell your commission breath. Like,
oh my God.
Like it's actually quite easy to spot. And
Mm-hmm.
if you're not careful, like, I don't know what it's like because I don't do this, but I feel like if an agent is not careful about that, it is not going to be a secret for very long. Like, it's going to be very obvious.
Yes.
And those are the agents that tend to not stick around too long, I think.
I
but
think
go ahead, Dave.
No, I was going to say something that you said, like, and this is a thought that I've had. The barrier to entry is probably not high enough for real estate agents.
100%
the barrier to sticking around is actually not that high, as long as you don't have to make a living at it. And a lot of brokers will leave a lot of inactive agents on their books.
Yeah.
The actual people who are making a living at this, the barrier to continuing is actually pretty high, because it's hard, unpleasant, nasty work.
Yeah. And your income
it's satisfying.
Your income is a roller coaster.
It is not an easy thing to do. Right. So I think that's part of, go ahead.
So let's frame this conversation in terms of this big NAR settlement that's come out. So, I think part of the tough job of a tough position that guys like you and I have been put in with this is that what's being reported by a lot of the media outlets, as well as just general understanding of the industry, how transactions work, what buyers agents do, what good buyers agents do, is nuanced, it's complicated, and it's, there's a lot of people out there. I told you I have a TikTok following, and I'll get comments like, "Oh, realtors are obsolete," and whatever. And the response is always like pretty basic. It's like, so you've obviously never had a complicated real estate transaction, but as you and I talked about, that's like, could be 75 to 80, 90% of them have some level of negotiating or hiccup or challenge that comes in, or like I have a listing now. It's very funny because I don't want to say too much specifics about it because it's still a pending transaction, but we have a lender issue, right? And it's been dragging and dragging and dragging. So we're a month beyond, and we finally get a clear to close, and I see that the buyers say they thank the lender. Hey, thanks so much. We had total faith in you. I'm like, I don't think you should have. Like, I know you don't see it. You think that they did something great. And I'm like, they haven't done a thing in a month. We were supposed to close a month ago. They haven't provided anything, and they're terrible to work with. But that's like where that misconception comes in. We're talking about a lender, but it's with agents too, is that, a lot of people just go with their neighbor. They go with one of those people that does 1 to 3 a year, because their friend sells 1 to 3 to their friends. But they're not coming to the office all the time and having water cooler conversations. We're taking classes or strategizing or joining forums like we're on and stuff like that. And that's where your high-end agents come in. And there is a big misconception about what that role is. So, and we only have about 5 minutes left, so we can continue this another time by all means, because I know you
about the settlement.
Yeah.
I see where people who are outside the business looking in would say this was a good thing. Mm-hmm. I think the people who started the class action lawsuit took tapped into a wellspring of negative sentiment and manipulated that.
Yes.
I think that there is going to be unleashed a lot of unintended consequences that are going to make the consumer experience worse. And people are going to say, it's going to get cheaper. It's probably not going to get cheaper, but I think more people are going to have to pay in unpleasant ways, and they're going to have to pay more because it's not a commodity.
Right.
You don't have somebody guiding you through that and looking after your interests. You're more likely to make potentially, and I don't want to use fear, uncertainty, and doom. I don't want to say, it's going to be more lawsuits. There are going to be more lawsuits, right?
I mean, let's just talk about
Yeah.
If you don't have proper representation, let's say that the person chooses to not pay a buyer's agent and they just go through a listing agent, which is something that we never recommend. I mean, because then you don't have representation. But in this case, maybe they have to, right? Like maybe they're one of those buyers, like a veteran who is not allowed to compensate an agent. So they have to go through a listing agent. And that veteran doesn't have a lot of cash. So they're buying a house that needs some work as well. Well, now they're going straight to the listing agent. They're using a VA loan. That listing agent is not representing them by definition.
Right.
They're representing their seller. And this, not even talking about like, well, how are they going to pay for their agent? Because they're not going to. But what's more concerning to me is making a catastrophic decision, taking a chance on a house that is just going to be a money pit without anyone saying, hey, let's pump the brakes here a little bit and take a look at some of the things we're agreeing to. Please don't waive all these conditions. You actually have some serious situations. Like again, in my area, a failed septic, like you can sell a house with a failed septic, but with very specific guidelines. Otherwise you just gave your seller a $50,000 problem that was previously the seller's, and the seller's saying, oh great, I'm out.
Bye. I'm down the road.
So like things like that to me are really what's not being talked about enough about this is that there are underserved buyers already, that it's already hard. And the one chance that they had was to make a good choice, hire a great agent who is going to advocate for you, help you make good decisions, and get an offer accepted. Now, maybe not. Or there's always a subset of people that made that choice, right? But I think you and I would acknowledge that more often than not, that's kind of a difficult conversation. Is like, well, why should I sign with you, Dave? There's 100 agents out there, and I don't know what houses you have available to. That's another one we get all the time, right? Well, I just want to see what houses you have.
So I'll say, in the case like of the unrepresented buyer, the seller's agent's job is to get the best deal they can for their customer.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's not to say that they're going to screw people over intentionally.
Yeah.
But they're not going to do any favors for the buyer because they're being hired to get the best deal they can. That doesn't mean they're being greedy or predatory.
Yep.
But they're not going to make it easy on the buyer to get the deal done.
They might not throw up a yield sign when they see
they're going to go proceed. Hey, and so alas, I need to beg off. There's a lot more of this conversation we should have
for sure.
And I'd be happy to come back at any time and dig deeper into this. I am angry about the reporting because I think a lot of it is wrong.
100%.
I actually downloaded the settlement and read the settlement statement. So I was like, okay, is this for real? I don't think a lot of people have done that, but it's like, hey, okay, what's really in here?
Yep.
I think it's an interesting moment in the business wherein I think there's an attempt to treat some symptoms when there are maybe some other systemic problems that we could address. And I don't think this settlement is going to change that. And that's what I think is.
No, I think there's specific points it's missing.
Yeah.
And I think that any good agent would tell you that they're open to change. It's just
the
that
good ones are open. The good ones are like, I'll figure out how to make money. Yeah.
Can we talk about the changes though? Like, can we talk about things that would help everyone? And maybe maybe help the messaging of how, TikTok people are saying realtors are obsolete, and say, well, hold on a second, let's talk about that. Like, what is it that you're?
I'm not worried about being obsolete. I am not.
I know, because we know how transactions go, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, let's do that, because Dave,
Okay.
we've gotten a chance to meet you, so I mean, we could definitely have you back in coming
Sounds
weeks,
good.
and let's dig in further, because I would love to do that with you.
Sounds good. Alas, I must away. Thanks for the opportunity, and I look forward to chatting with you again.
My pleasure, Dave. And I think what I had said to you last time is, I can bring in a lender or maybe even another agent. We could do a little roundtable. So we'll talk soon, but I really do appreciate you coming out. I know we had tried to connect a few times, and wish you nothing but the best. Good luck out there, and we'll talk soon.
Take care.
All right. Take care, Dave. All right, so that was Dave Gallman out of Dallas, and Dave had a hard stop because him and his wife were switching video calls, and he has to take the kids and everything else. So we'll give Dave a break. But thanks for sitting in. Dave's I picked Dave out because, again, online I saw like this is an agent that really knows what he's talking about. Again, we have all these different online Facebook groups and stuff that we join with agents strategizing or commiserating or anything. And, so you get a chance to see agents that comment something on either one of my posts or a post that we both commented on, say, you know what, this guy really knows what he's talking about. So that's why I like to do that. I mentioned that we had Jody Garcia out of Austin a few months back, and same thing is like, it's just good to have the people that are truly good agents and truly love this job. I mean, I love this job. This is actually the longest in my professional career that I've had a job. I was in the same industry for longer. I was in the consulting / pharmaceutical industry prior to real estate. And I was in that for about 12 to 15 years, depending on, a few considerations, but jobs within that industry, I think the longest I was in one was like 4 years. And obviously I was making good jumps, you're jumping around to different opportunities and whatnot. But this is the longest I've ever sat in one position in my entire professional career. So, and I'm proud of that, but what has kind of kept me in this industry is taking care of my clients. And as Dave and I talked about, not throwing people under the bus or just trying to get a deal done or whatever. It's like truly advocating for your clients. But also guys like Dave, people that we network with within the industry, colleagues here in the office here in Keller Williams, who, we have high-end conversations with, and we try to figure out new ways to help consumers better, because it's a unique business in that, specifically the reason that I really kind of stuck with this business and got into it and wanted to stay here was because I left corporate America and said, I want a job where being a nice guy and helping people is equitable, because in corporate America, that's not necessarily the case. There's a lot of bureaucracy and politicking and, all kinds of things that I just wasn't really interested in. Right. I didn't like, necessarily like reporting to a project every day and doing the same thing day in and day out. Real estate, it is never the same day, 2 days in a row, and every deal is completely different. Clients are completely different. So, I think that hearing these conversations for a consumer like Dave and I were talking about, I think is so important for people to hear what agents are saying, because we are not trying to convince anyone of something. We are trying to inform people of these are some of the things that maybe people don't think about. So we will definitely continue that conversation with Dave, and I thank him again for showing up. It's always like, that's kind of the drag about doing this, is it's hard to schedule and, get people all on the same page and everything. But I really enjoyed that conversation with Dave. And as I said, maybe we'll bring in a lender or something like that to have kind of a round table. So, but thanks for tuning in as always. And I appreciate you all. If you have any sort of real estate questions, you can do several things. I mean, my phone number is right here. It's hard to do this in a mirror image. Here's my phone number. That is my direct line. Text me, call me, whatever you need. Also, whatever platform you're watching this in, LinkedIn, YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, go ahead and message me on there. I'll get it. Any number of ways to contact me, whether that be a specific real estate question you want to do business, or just a general topic you would like me to discuss in the future. So more to come on the NAR settlement for sure. It's going to be a hot topic probably through the summer. None of these changes are immediate. Nothing is permanent because it's still a proposed settlement, but it's definitely going to be a hot topic for the next several months. And I think it's important that now some news outlets are actually getting it right and saying, hold on a second. I know this seems like it might be good for the consumer, but here's some reasons why it might not be. And I think that's the conversation a lot of agents are trying to have and explain to consumers, hey, just so you understand exactly the mechanics of this and how this works, here's some considerations that are really not being reported. So we are going to talk about that next week among those topics. And again, I am talking about these on TikTok. If you want to just get some bite-size versions of these conversations, go to my TikTok. There's some content on there. I'll be putting more out. TikTok, I'm at Hunted and Born Realtor. But some of the things we're going to talk about is how buyers agents are compensated today and what is being proposed, how buyers agents are being paid, the way this is being reported and why some of that reporting is problematic or short-sighted or straight up misinformation. We're going to talk about some of our buyers that are not being served by this. So we're going to talk about specifically veterans who use VA loans, FHA buyers, and just people with less cash. We're going to talk about impact on sellers, which is something that almost no one is talking about. This is going to have an impact on sellers, and it's nuanced, but it is important to talk about because it could have an effect on them. Slashing home prices. That's one of the big headlines, right? Is like they're saying, with this change, home prices are going to get slashed. Commissions are getting slashed. I will contend to you, none of that is true. And I will tell you exactly why that is. I do think at the end of the day, for good agents, this is a good thing. For part-time or, not so great agents, this could be lights out for them. I'm not complaining about that because honestly, it's one of the hardest part of my job is dealing with not so great agents. And we'll talk a little bit about the new rules with the MLS's disclosing buyer compensation, because I think that is also an important conversation. So thanks again to Dave Gallman out of Dallas, and hope everyone enjoyed this. Hope you all have a great Easter weekend. If you celebrate, otherwise have a great weekend. Hopefully the sun is out, and take care, be healthy. And if you need anything at all, give me a call. And thanks again. Take care.